Okay, welcome everyone to the Ethics and Moral Problems Unit 1 test review. So I'm your instructor, Dr. A, and I will be conducting this very brief live session. As you know, the exam will be made up of short answer essay questions. And we're just going to quickly go over the questions in the study guide. Okay, starting with Chapter 8, Virtue Ethics. What are the elements that constitute a person, according to Plato? What is the proper relationship between those elements? In other words, what is a virtuous or excellent human being? So as Plato explains in the Republic and in other dialogues, the human soul is made up of three powers or faculties or elements. One might even say parts, although that's a little misleading because the soul is not a physical entity. It is something that is metaphysical. Starting at the bottom is desire or appetite. So appetite, of course, refers to the desire for food, drink, sexual activity, that sort of thing. So the appetites are rooted in the body. They relate to bodily desire. Now, more broadly speaking, desire, as distinguished from appetite, is any kind of love or the feeling that you gravitate towards something, that you want to possess something in a more abstract sense. So your desire to become wise, right, is not an appetite. It is a longing of your soul to acquire wisdom. Remember, philosophy means literally the love of wisdom. It is the desire to become wise, to become complete in some sense. Right, so desire and appetite are an intrinsic part of the human soul, of human nature. We all experience appetites and desire. Now, this aspect of the soul, appetite and desire, is non-rational. That's an important distinction to make. These are non-rational faculties of the soul. They need to be guided by reason in order for the human soul to be harmonious, well integrated, for the human being to be virtuous and happy. Now, going up on the hierarchy of faculties of soul, we have spiritedness, or spirit is one of the translations I've seen in textbooks. Spirit or spiritedness. Spiritedness is that part of you that makes you feel anger, right? That makes you fight for what you believe is right. Spiritedness is also that part of you that makes you competitive, makes you aggressive, makes you ambitious. It accounts for the love of one's own that is a very common feature in human beings. The love of what is yours, your family. You love your family more than you love other people's families because your family is yours, right? You love your country more than you love other people's countries, foreign countries, because your country is yours. Right? Patriotism is an aspect, an example of the spirited element in the human soul, right? Now, that's also, spiritedness is also an irrational or sub-rational faculty of the soul. And what I mean by sub-rational is that, or non-rational, is that it can be used for good or for ill, right? That's a very important distinction to make. The appetites can be good, they can serve a good purpose. Your appetite for food and drink can sustain and nourish your body, which is good. But the appetites, if they're not properly guided by reason, they can lead you astray. You can become addicted to eating junk food or to drugs and cigarettes and so forth, and that would destroy your health. So the appetites have to be guided by reason. Reason is, of course, the highest and most important faculty of the soul. Reason is that that part of you that makes it possible to determine what is good for you, to seek out and identify the good, and to identify the means through which you can acquire that good. And what is good for you depends on the circumstances you're in, right? It's complex. It's extremely complex. Let me just give you a quick example, a very simple example. Let's say you are hungry, right? Hunger is the body's way of telling you that it needs nourishment. Not junk food, but nourishment. Not mere empty calories, but a nutritious meal, right? Vitamins, minerals, the right ratio of healthy carbs and fats and protein and so on. So you find yourself feeling hungry. So you determine, your mind, your reason tells you that what is good for you in that particular circumstance would be food, nutritious food. So you've identified the good. The second stage is when you identify the means through which you can acquire that particular good. So let's say you're walking through an orchard and you see apples dangling from the trees, and you realize that's the quickest way for you to get some nourishment is to pluck an apple or two from the trees, right? And then consume them right then and there. That would be the easiest way to achieve that good in that particular circumstance. Okay? That's called prudence. That's called using your intelligence, your reason, to discern and to acquire the good, what is good for you in any given circumstance. That's a very crude and simple example, but I think it gives you an idea. So reason is supposed to be like a king. It's like the king of the soul. It issues commands. It rules. And the two lower faculties, spiritedness and appetite, desire, are supposed to obey reason's commands. That's what moderation is. Moderation is when you have nothing in excess. There's a complete and perfect balance in the soul. So with regards to appetites, a moderate human being only eats to the extent that his body needs nourishment, neither more nor less, right? The moderate man knows that drinking a glass of red wine every day is good for you. It increases your good cholesterol. It has antioxidants. It has a number of very beneficial properties. But the moderate person only has that one glass, maybe 1.5 glasses. The immoderate person is the one who has to have 6 glasses every day, which actually destroys all of the health benefits and actually creates a health hazard, right? So the appetites are controlled by reason. The appetites only seek what is good, right? Similarly with spiritedness, as I pointed out, spiritedness is a non-rational element in the soul. Let's look at anger. Spiritedness is known as the source of anger in human beings. Now, anger has a beneficial purpose. It is actually healthy to be angry, but only under the right circumstances, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right reasons. For example, if you see an injustice happening, if you see someone beating up an innocent bystander on the street for no reason, you should get angry. It is the proper response to feel anger at that injustice and to want to do something to rectify the situation. So anger in that instance is perfectly justified and good, because that anger will spur you on to try to do something to remedy that injustice, either by intervening directly or by calling the police. But at the same time, anger, if it is not guided by reason, if it is not guided by a correct understanding of justice, which it is reason's job to discover, anger can become very destructive and very dangerous, right? We all know, well, we've all known at some point in our lives some very hot-headed, angry people that are simply just angry for its own sake, not out of any sense of justice or injustice, but simply because they enjoy being angry. It gives them a sense of deep satisfaction, right? The road rage drivers, the hot-headed people, the militant, fanatical, angry people, these are human beings that have a serious imbalance in their souls, or so Plato would say, because their spiritedness is not restrained by reason. And when you have an imbalance in the soul, you will be unhappy, you will be miserable, according to Plato. All right. So read the excerpt in Book 4 of the Republic in Chapter 8. And you should be able to answer the following question. Why do we need to control our appetites or desires at all times, according to Plato? Do you agree? What are the political ramifications of comparing the rule of reason over appetites to the rule of the guardians over the general population? Well, I think we sufficiently answered the first part of the question about why we must always control our appetites and desires, according to Plato. What distinguishes human beings from, let's say, animals is reason, is the ability to exercise prudence and foresight, the ability to do cost-benefit analyses when we are at the crossroads and have to make a difficult decision. Our reason, our intelligence is what separates us from beasts and animals. Therefore, to live as a complete human being, to be fully human, requires that we live in accordance with that part of us that distinguishes us from other living things, that defines us as human, and that would be to live according to reason. And it is reason's job, as we pointed out before, to identify the good and to identify the means of achieving the good. Animals, on the other hand, don't have rationality. They cannot exercise prudence. They are simply obeying the law of stimulus and response. They are obeying instinct. Their actions are determined by their instincts, by their natures. They cannot live otherwise than they do. Human beings can. So, unless you want to live like an animal who is a slave to his appetites, you have to live according to reason to be fully human. Now, with regards to the political ramifications of comparing the rule of reason over appetites to the rule of the guardians over the general population, I think it's pretty clear. What you would have in this kind of regime is not a liberal democracy, an egalitarian society where everyone is treated the same. Far from it. If only the wise were to be in charge and everyone else had to obey the wise, you would have a very unequal society in which the vast majority of the population is ruled the way a subject is ruled by a king. So this is not a democratic society. This is not a free society. But the question is this kind of a regime desirable? Would you want to live and be a part of this kind of regime? And if so, what stratum of the society would you occupy? Would you be a philosopher king? Would you be one of the members of the military, the auxiliaries? Or would you be a member of the lower class, the merchants and farmers and day laborers who represent desire and appetite, and who therefore must be governed by reason, by the philosopher kings? Who would you be in such a regime? It's an interesting question to think about. Okay, Plato's myth of the cave is an allegory of what Plato sees as reality. What does it mean? Who are the prisoners? Where is the cave? What does it mean to see the sun? Okay, so an allegory is a story that has symbolism, and a double meaning. So the myth of the cave is not really about caves. The cave is an image for something deeper, right? The cave represents the enclosed worldview, the society into which we are born, the collection of ideas and attitudes and beliefs and opinions and prejudices that we inherit by our culture, by our tradition. The prisoners represent those who are born into a specific tradition, who only know the opinions that are given to them by their parents, their teachers, the media, the society around them, their peers, right? Those shadows that are cast on the wall represent the fundamental opinions and beliefs that define a people, a society. The men who are behind the raised wall, who hold the statues in front of the fire, casting the shadows onto the wall, those represent the elite, the ruling elite, who establish and perpetuate the fundamental belief system that governs their particular society. So here in the United States, one of the fundamental beliefs is the equality before the law, that all human beings, or at least all Americans, should be treated equally before the law. Gender equality is another fundamental opinion that defines us as a people, as the American people, that men and women should be treated the same. Women should have the exact same rights as men. If you go to other parts of the world, that is not the case. There are countries on this planet that do not believe in gender equality. Their fundamental opinions oppose the notion of treating men and women the same. And that's how they choose to do things. But in our cave, it is a fundamental belief that we should treat men and women the same. So the prisoners then represent those who are born into and remain in a particular society, a particular tradition, who inherit a particular worldview. Now, in the allegory, one of the prisoners is released from his chains and is forced out of the cave. He's dragged out. He doesn't go out willingly, which is an important teaching in the myth. And when he goes out, he exits the cave through the rough, steep path, which indicates that enlightenment is a very painful and difficult and arduous process. He escapes into the light of day, and he's blinded initially because it's so bright. The cave is very dark. And eventually he's able to look up at the sun and see it directly. Now the sun, of course, represents truth, the ultimate truth. The cave, the darkness in the cave, represents ignorance. What is the significance of light and darkness here? Well, light is what discloses reality. Light is what makes seeing possible. Without light, you wouldn't be able to see anything, right? The world is visible only in the light. Darkness shrouds reality. It shrouds the truth. It obscures it. It makes it difficult or impossible to see. So to see the sun directly means to encompass, to visualize, to become one with the truth. Of course, when the enlightened man goes back down into the cave, he is ridiculed by the slaves, by the prisoners inside. They think he's a crazy person. And eventually, not only do they mock him, but they become hostile to him. And the prisoners end up killing the enlightened man when he insists on trying to get them out of the cave so that they could see what he had seen. And of course, this is exactly what happens to Socrates. Socrates is tried and convicted in 399 BC in Athens for corrupting the youth. He was treated in the same way as the prisoners treated the enlightened man in the cave allegory. Socrates is put to death at age 70. So Plato is saying a great deal about human nature in this myth. He suggests that most human beings do not want to be enlightened and in fact are hostile to enlightenment and to wise people. That most people are slavish and they cling to their beliefs without ever bothering to think them through or to analyze and criticize them. They're like sheep, a flock of sheep. Okay, let's turn back to Aristotle. Explain Aristotle's theory of the four causes. So there are, starting from the bottom, you have the material, then the efficient cause, then the formal cause, and then the final cause. The material cause is simply the stuff out of which something is made. So let's take a table as an example. So the material cause of a table, let's say, would be wood. Let's say you have a carpenter who makes tables out of oak. So oak would be the material cause of that table. The efficient cause is basically the maker, the agent that brings that object into being, into existence. So the efficient cause of a table would be the craftsman, the carpenter, the furniture builder. The formal cause is basically the plan or type or design of a thing. So the formal cause of the table would be like the blueprint of the table, the organization of its parts. So you would have, a flat surface that is standing on four legs, and the surface is maybe 4 feet off the ground, so you can sit down to it and eat off of it and rest things on it. So the overall disposition of the thing's parts, the way they fit together, the overall layout or design of the object would be the formal cause. And then we get to the final cause, which is, in a sense, the most important one. The final cause is the why of a thing. The final cause is the purpose that the thing serves, the purpose for which it was built, the reason why it exists, the goal, the telos, to use the Greek term, of the object. So what is the purpose of a table? Well, it is a structure that is meant to be used to eat off of, to read or study off of, to lay things on. Tables have very specific purposes, a very narrow range of purposes. So the final cause is the reason why the thing was made in the first place, the reason for its existence, its purpose, its goal. So when people ask questions like, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What is a human being? What is this all for? They're basically asking to know the final cause. What is the ultimate purpose of the human being? Well, for Aristotle, it would be virtue. Virtue is the final cause of the human being, of the human soul. And virtue means excellence, being in the best possible condition you can be in, and living up to your full humanity, which requires using your power of reason, because reason is what makes you human. Reason is what distinguishes you as a human being and distinguishes you from other living things that do not have reason, like cats and frogs and insects. What is Aristotle's golden mean? Does it imply that the virtuous person is an average person of average talents and intelligence? Well, the golden mean is basically the idea that In order to be virtuous, you have to strike a balance in everything that you do between the between excess and deficiency. The golden mean is what lets you achieve moderation. So an easy example would be with respect to eating, right? To be moderate in your dietary habits, you would have to consume just enough food and drink to satisfy your body's nutritional requirements. Nothing more, nothing less. And of course, we're all different. An 8-foot tall wrestler is going to have to consume far more calories per day than someone who is 5 foot tall and weighs 100 pounds. But each individual has his or her golden mean with respect to food and drink. Right? For each person, there is a bullseye that you want to reach so that you do not eat too little and therefore deprive your body of nutrients that it needs, nor eat too much, which would add extra calories, extra weight, and possibly for health complications. So the golden mean requires that you know yourself. You have to have self-awareness, self-knowledge. How much is just the right amount for me, right? And then you have to have the discipline, which is not always easy, to always be moderate in your intake. So it does not imply that the virtuous person is average, with average talents and intelligence. In fact, hitting the mean consistently suggests that you are an extraordinary person, a rare, an exceptional person, because it's so difficult to do consistently. Right? Virtue is rare. Why is it rare? Because it is difficult. And why is it excellent? Well, because it is difficult and rare. Okay, explain Aristotle's theory of virtue in detail using at least 3 examples. At least 2 must be Aristotle's own. So you want to talk about Aristotle's theory of teleology. Remember, teleology is the notion that everything has an inbuilt purpose, right? For which it strives, or to which it strives, or for which it strives, rather. Right? So an acorn, what is the telos, or the purpose, the inbuilt purpose of an acorn? Well, it is to become a fully grown oak tree. So for an acorn to reach its purpose, its inbuilt purpose, to satisfy its nature, its inclination to become an oak tree, it must fully become an oak tree. So you have to plant it in the right kind of soil. It has to have the right degree of moisture. There must be enough sunlight and so forth. And the acorn in the right conditions will flourish and realize its potential to become a fully grown, healthy oak tree. So virtue then is basically the condition whereby a thing has fully realized its telos, or purpose. It has realized its nature or essence. It is in the best possible condition to do its work well. Right? Everything has a specific task or work that it and only it can do well, or that it can do better than anything else. I'll give an example from Plato's Republic. I'll let you look up Aristotle's examples on your own. In the Republic, Socrates gives an example of a pruning knife. You know, the Greeks, they were wine drinkers, wine producers. Wine is a very important part of Greek culture, ancient Greek culture. And Aristotle gives the example of a pruning knife, a knife that is made specifically to cut vines when you're harvesting grapes to make wine with. Now he says that the pruning knife, in order to be virtuous, to be excellent, it must be in the best possible condition to cut vines. So the blades have to be very sharp. The overall design of the pruning knife has to be in the best possible condition to cut vines, as opposed to cutting leather or other objects. And insofar as the pruning knife is in the best possible condition to do its work, which is to cut vines, to do its work better than any other implement or tool, insofar as it satisfies those conditions, it is excellent or virtuous. And then he gives the example of the eye. What is the work or the purpose of the human eye? It is to see. So in order for the eye to be virtuous, it must be in the best possible condition to do its work well. So an eye that is diseased, an eye that has glaucoma or cataracts, is not in the best possible condition to do its work well, which is to see. And therefore, an eye that is diseased or has cataracts or is blind would not be a virtuous or excellent eye. It would be in a poor working condition. So virtue is basically excellence. It is excellence. And everything has its virtue. The human being has its virtue, and for Aristotle and Plato, that virtue is contemplation. That's the highest activity of which we are capable, and to be in the best possible condition to do that activity and to consistently engage in that activity at the very highest level is the pinnacle of human excellence. That's what it means to live well and to live happily. Okay, well, that covers the list of questions. So if you would like any further clarification, just feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll get back to you as soon as I get it. Okay, well, thank you very much, and I hope you are well prepared to take this test. I hope that you found this review helpful, and I look forward to reading your responses. Thanks, and you have a great day.